And so I share that backstory with you because then you will have context to the three major takeaways that I have learned from my experience with miscarriage. Hey, what's up, Mama? So today I'm talking about something less fun than typical on my channel, but I think it's really important for me to talk about this. One, because I do have a small platform and I'm able to reach you who may be across the world from me. And if this is something that you've gone through, I really want to use this platform to connect with you and remind you that you are never alone. And two, because I really want to help normalize this. This is something that happens so often, and I feel like so many mamas either feel shame or guilt in some way, even though that is not for them to carry. And so I think the more we speak about these types of experiences in our life, the easier it is for us to release any shame or guilt or just feelings of loneliness that we often carry through these experiences. So I want to share my miscarriage story with you. And I also, more importantly, want to share my three major takeaways from this experience in hopes that you can either see the silver lining in your experience or that you're able to identify the beauty even in sad or trying moments. So just a bit of backstory. My husband and I actually were not looking to expand our family just yet. And we laugh because we had just had a conversation that we were actually going to wait a bit longer before, expanding our family. And it was within a week that I found out that I was pregnant. And so sometimes we make plans and the universe laughs at us. So I had taken a test and we found out that we were pregnant. And there was totally moments of shock where we were just like, what? I had no indication. I did not feel pregnant. I did not have the pregnancy symptoms that I had with my son, and I knew I was pregnant right away with Kai. So this totally caught me off guard because I felt like I was pretty in touch with my body and that I would recognize if I were pregnant. So that shock quickly turned into excitement. And, we got to be excited for about 9 days. So from the time I took the pregnancy test, from the morning that I miscarried, was about 9 days. And within that stretch of time, I did again tell my husband, I said, I don't feel pregnant. It's like, I think I need to take another pregnancy test. And I did. And it came back positive. And then I think that day, actually, I started to feel a bit of morning sickness. And then maybe one other day in this span that I knew that I was pregnant. So this was quite different in terms of my experience, but I didn't worry too much about this, as every pregnancy is different. And so I carried on. During this time, I did start to spot. And again, this is something I didn't worry about, as I spotted through the first trimester with Kai, and I had a perfectly healthy pregnancy and kiddo, and so I wasn't concerned about that. But the night before I miscarried, I noticed that the quantity of blood had started to increase. And so while I wasn't overly concerned, I did note it, and I was keeping an eye on it. And then I went to bed that evening and I woke up in the morning and went to use the restroom. And that is when I knew that I miscarried, because I was just bleeding pretty profusely and there was tissue and clotting, and my intuition had just said right away, there's not a chance that I did not just miscarry. I made the appointment. I went in to see an OBGYN. I hadn't even been in for my initial ultrasound at this point because I was about 6-7 weeks pregnant. So I was actually scheduled that day to get on the phone with a nurse to schedule my first ultrasound. So they canceled that interview and just had me come in. And they opted to do an intravaginal ultrasound. And so, you're able to see on the monitor what was going on in your uterus. And while there was no sign of life whatsoever, you could see the sac where the pregnancy had formed. And so I was instructed from there to go down to the lab and get my blood drawn over a couple week period of time to make sure that my HCG levels were decreasing, because this OBGYN wasn't convinced that it could not be an ectopic pregnancy. So I went to the lab several times and my HCG levels did decrease. I have to go back in again, actually, because they're still not down to 0. Last time I checked, it was hanging out at 40 and it should be less than 5. So I will return for that. And so I share that backstory with you because then you will have context to the 3 major takeaways that I have learned from my experience with miscarriage. And that first major takeaway for me was that loss can find you regardless of how far along you are in your pregnancy. Whether you are 6-7 weeks and you just found out you were pregnant, or unfortunately you are in your 2nd or even 3rd trimester, losing life that you know you are nurturing inside of your body is a certain kind of pain, and you are not immune from that pain just because, you know, you were early in your pregnancy. And that's been a process for me. And I know that the day that I found out that I miscarried, I was very much in action mode. It was like, I know I need to get to the doctors. I just have to get through these steps. And so I can put my brave face on and I can suppress my emotions in that moment because I know that I just need to get certain things handled. But then I was able to sort of sit with myself and feel my emotions, and it definitely stings, because even in those short days of finding out that you're pregnant, you go to hoping and dreaming about this kid and this little soul's future and the adventures you'll have together and the memories you'll make and the lessons you hope to impart. And it stings to lose that, you know, like a dream deferred. And so I just want you to know that regardless of whether your pregnancy was planned or not, regardless how far along you are, you may feel pain, you may feel loss. And that is completely normal. And I hope that you can honor that and allow yourself space to feel that. Oh boy. So the second major takeaway from my miscarriage experience is that both you and your partner are likely on an emotional journey to process what has happened. And my husband and I have very different ways of processing grief and stress. And so we really had to work on communicating and checking in with one another regularly to honor how each of us were processing this experience, because it was very different. As I mentioned earlier, I definitely went through a phase where it was like, I'm suppressing my emotions because I have to get through, you know, the doctor's visits or scheduling Kai to be watched or showing up for Kai. And I would allow myself time and space to process my feelings and emotions almost behind the scenes. And so I feel like my husband didn't always feel like he was able to grieve with me. And so we both were on this, are you okay? Are you okay? Because my husband wanted to show up for me as the strong one and as the rock. And he didn't want to burden me with his emotional process. But I know that about him. And so I just made sure to check in with him regularly and say, how are you doing? You know, what are you feeling? And we both had to learn that there's no one way to process this. And just because your partner is processing in a different way than you does not make it less valid. And so how do you hold space for not only yourself, but for your partner through this? Because for me, it has come in waves. I have days and weeks where I am fine, and then I have moments where it just hits me, and that sting and that feeling of loss comes back like it had just happened. And so learning to be okay with your process and really challenging yourself to hold space for your partner's process, even if it looks different, really will benefit the both of you, because through these trying times, you have an opportunity to come together and be even more connected than you were prior to this. And that is one of the beautiful things that can manifest from loss if you allow it. That is something beautiful, I think, that has come from this experience for my husband and I. We've been through a lot of trials and tribulations in our life, and so learning that we can rise to any occasion, no matter what, really helps us just deepen our connection and our trust in life. It's a process, but I think if you trust that process, that is where the beauty lies. And the final takeaway from my experience was that the pain may catch you by surprise. That the physical aspect of miscarrying is not really common knowledge. I feel like what I went through, I didn't expect. I expected bleeding. I guess on a subconscious level, I would expect to have my body to be expelling tissue and clotting, but not to the degree, especially so early in to my pregnancy. In our head, we think about, you know, this baby being the size of a blueberry and not much is going on, but your body has to create the space for that blueberry. And so there is so much that has already formed and developed inside of you. And when you miscarry, you are seeing that, you know, house, for lack of better terms, that was being built inside for this little soul leaving you. And I think that for me, there was a big emotional connection with that physical process. Like every time I was seeing that, it triggered the sadness and the loss. And also like just shock for what your body is, again, producing and building, because seeing it on a monitor is very different than actually having an inside look to what's happening inside your body. So just the sadness of like, that didn't work. And so for over a week, you know, bleeding the amount of blood, that was also not even communicated to me clearly by my OBGYN. I did not know how much blood. I mean, there was a day where I was confined to the house because I was bleeding so much. And there were days where the cramping was so painful that I was just hanging out in my bed. I had severe low back pain. I had severe uterine cramping as my uterus was shrinking back, even though it hadn't expanded so big yet. But on your second pregnancy or your third or fourth, your uterus, it knows what to do. So it springs into action much quicker than it does the first time around. And so there was a lot of physical pain in that. Took me by surprise because, again, you're just trying to tend to your emotional wounds and then you're dealing with the physical aspect as well, which is a tough combination. With that specific takeaway, I would, if you can, lean on your support system, because you need to allow yourself time and space to heal emotionally and physically. And I think it's important that we are allowed to sit with this experience. And I know it's so hard because not everyone has that luxury, you know? A lot of women are expected to show up to work the next day or carry on as if nothing has happened because you have multiple kids. Maybe you're a single mom and like the show must go on. And I just think it is so hard. It's so hard when you aren't granted that space to just heal, even for a little bit of time. So if it's your mom, if it's your spouse, if it's a best friend, if it's a neighbor, like truly consider your support system and see and reach out so that you can give yourself just a little bit of space to process and to rest and to heal. So the beautiful aspects for me is, one, I get to come on here and talk and hopefully connect with many women from around the world who are watching this video who have either been through this or know someone who has. And just the feeling of connection and knowing that you absolutely are never alone. Also, the ability to connect deeper with my spouse, and just the compassion and love I'm able to hold in my heart for all the other women who have gone through this. And while I've always held love and space and compassion in my heart for anyone who has experienced this, as humans, it's really hard for us to wrap our minds around what it's like unless we've walked a similar path. And so this just expands my heart and my compassion even more for every woman who has experienced this. So there is beauty in loss. Of course, there is sadness and grief in loss, but your life, what is your life about? What is your story about? Is it about love? Is it about connection? Is it about beauty? And if it is, can we find the love, the compassion, the beauty, and the connection even in the tougher times of our life? So that's my goal, is to always be able to find the joy and the beauty and the love in good times and in bad. So I hope that this video resonates with you. And I would ask that if you've either been through this experience yourself or you know somebody who has, give this video a thumbs up or leave a comment below, because I think it would be so beautiful to just have a show through engagement of how connected we all are, and just remind each and every one of us that we are not alone. I hope you take something away from this video, whether you have experienced this or not, and I can't wait to catch you in the next video on a brighter note. Thank you so much for watching. So much love to you, and I will see you in the next one.